Hello, welcome to the second part of the Oregon Hang Gliding School Ground School. In the first part, I introduced myself and the story of how I became an instructor. I provided an overall topic outline of this presentation with a plug-in for my Flight Concepts video textbook and Google Classroom and syllabus that supplements whatever reading you're getting from your certified instructor or school. And then I immediately got into the history of aviation, how hang gliding was an essential part of that evolution, including the formulation of the golden rule of hang gliding. That is, only exposing yourself to one new thing at a time as you develop into an independent and self-reliant pilot. Now we're going to go into a little bit more of what to expect on that emotional journey of becoming a hang glider pilot, but then turn off that Kirk and become Spock in our aerodynamics portion to analyze how an airplane controls itself as compared to a hang glider, and that difference is going to be useful with some practical visual examples in a simulator and in the field. Okay, so with that, and another thing, I won't have enough time to go over flying speeds. I think really that's for part 3 of this video series. Oh, and also I'd like to remind you that all the information that you discover in this ground school cannot be applied without supervision and assistance from an instructor that will be able to recognize all the pitfalls. None of this information can predict what you are going to experience in real life on various hills and in conditions in which peculiar techniques and instructional guidelines are absolutely required for safety. So that's my disclaimer. Remember, do not try to teach yourself how to hang glide. Okay, let's talk about your learning progression and what you can expect in hang gliding. Now, remember what I told you about the physical, intellectual, and emotional skills that we need to integrate to become successful. And remember what I said about most of us kind of disown one or the other. And so that almost guarantees that we're going to have plateaus and actual pits of frustration in our learning progression. And at times like that, you have to have the faith that everybody experiences this, and you're not exceptional in that experience. And through persistence and determination and inspiration and encouragement from your instructors, and also advice to get over those problem areas, you will become successful. It's not terribly athletic to be in this sport. It just requires average emotional, intellectual, and physical skills. But like I said, we tend to disown one or the other, and so we may have to put out more effort into doing that book reading, or getting somewhat in shape, or calming our nerves, and just having the emotional determination to get through this. So with that, let's turn off the Kirk and let's go to the Spock part of this presentation with the aerodynamics. Let's first show you how the Wright brothers did it, because in some ways it's easier to understand the cause and effect. You know, people are more familiar with machines than their own bodies. Okay, so an airplane is full of machines. Now, what's a machine? Well, remember your middle school physics. There are 6 simple machines. There's the lever, where you can lever something out of the ground using a stick. It's easier than pulling it out directly. There's the wheel that decreases friction. There's the pulley that allows you to lift heavier things at the expense of distance. Ramp, screw, wedge. Okay, so those are the 6 simple machines all other machines are made from. Okay, so what are machines are for? Well, machines are for because we're weak. We're not fast enough. We're not strong enough. We're not even clever enough. We're using computer machines even to assist our reasoning. We are using Google Maps to get where we need to go. Okay, so The first machine that makes it easier for an airplane to fly is a lever. Okay, it's a stick called the control stick, okay, at the center here, where I can pull back on that stick and it leads to pulleys and cables to the back of the plane to a flap called the elevator. Now this elevator works like your hand outside the car window. You push your hand outside the car window like this, the wind hits your hand, and you can feel the wind push your hand up. You go like this, the wind hits the top of your hand, and you can feel your hand get pushed down. And you've been bored going down the highway playing with the wind, okay? So I pull back on the stick, the elevator goes up, that makes the tail go down, and the nose goes up, and that's pitch. Okay, now roll. Now if I have that stick and I move the stick left or right, that makes opposing flaps on the plane, like your hand outside the car window, go up or down. And just like your hand outside the window being pushed up or down, okay, this wing will rise and this wing will descend. And now you've got roll. So pitch and roll. Okay? Okay, now in an airplane you have a vertical fin. That vertical fin is like the rudder on a boat. You've seen, at least in the movies, people using the lever on the rudder and kind of directing the bow of the boat where it wants to go. Well, just like in an airplane, just like in a boat, in an airplane we have two pedals at our feet. If you depress the left pedal, the rudder goes like so, and then that means the wind will hit my hand, push the tail this way. Look at, now I'm flying at you sideways, which is a very interesting difference between an airplane and a hang glider, because we don't have direct control over that. And so here we have yaw. Okay, so what's the significance of yaw? Well, imagine, let's go back to our analogy of a river, okay? So here you see the current coming from the left here, and here you have a kayak. And our goal is to get across the river from point A to point B. Now, if the kayak isn't yawed into the current, what will happen, you can imagine, if you've had any experience on a river, is you will drift with the current. But if you point the bow of the kayak slightly into the current, okay, proportional actually to how much current there is, okay, you will go directly across the river. Now, in an airplane, say we're in an airliner and we've got a stiff wind coming from the left here, and maybe it's a 30-40 knot wind. Well, believe me, an airliner, if it didn't yaw into the wind using its rudder, the pilot using the rudder pedals, okay, it would drift off the runway just like this, okay? But when the rudder pedals are used and the nose of the airplane is pointed somewhat into the wind, it goes straight down the runway, and just before the wheels touch the ground, they hit the other rudder to make the wheels go straight down the runway. And so it's important to understand the significance of yaw, because we're going to actually at least anticipate yaw, and in one instant control it in our hang gliding training. Okay, here's one of my students performing a crosswind takeoff with the glider significantly yawed to his left, even though the path is to his right. And notice when he lands, it will be to the left into the wind. Okay, we saw one of my students performing a simple beginner flight in a modern hang glider exhibiting some yaw. Now let's watch Otto perform his experimental flights over 100 years ago, exhibiting his control over the glider. Oh, incidentally, this is a hangar that he had built on top of that conical hill that you'll see in some future slides. This guy was really trying to control the conditions, getting back to, one new factor at a time. So here we go. Let's watch Otto fly for an audience. Yay! So there, Otto flying his glider, doing a perfect flare at the end. The guy was athletic, not only intelligent, but athletic as well. So that was an example of the kind of proficiency he achieved in a beginner flight, and perhaps even more than that. And so let's examine a little bit more closely what he achieved in the next slide. Now, Otto achieved Hang 1 skill. Okay, what does that mean? Well, Hang 1 is just part of our the first proficiency in our particular system. Now, proficiency systems, you're familiar with, like maybe judo or karate, yellow belt, green belt, brown belt, black belt, or maybe the scuba diving proficiency system. Even orchestra has got a proficiency system, third chair, second chair, first chair. Okay, it's just a way of giving us a snapshot of your skills at a particular time. Okay, because proficiencies do regress if you don't practice them. Remember that. Okay, so Otto achieved Hang 1 skill, and not only that, I think he actually did more than Hang 1, because that hill that you see here, okay, he had bulldozed into a conical shape so that he can control the environment, okay, and control variables. He would take off in a stiffer wind, and he would rise and actually then perform those turns that we saw in that last video and then land. I believe he was like Hang 1.5 at least. Okay, so Hang 1 is straight and level flying. Okay, straight and level flying, maybe in a couple conditions in which you are moving left and right, and you are like on rails going exactly where you want to go. Okay, you're not like some little butterfly in the wind. And maybe a couple methods of landing, like running out the landing, half running, half flaring, or full flaring. Okay, I'll talk about flaring and those techniques and terms later. Hang 2 is turning flight. Okay, and turning flight from probably a little bit higher elevation. You've read more of the book, you understand more of the physics, and maybe a little bit more about weather, and it gives you access then to high flight. Okay, so oftentimes you are getting your Hang 2 on a small hill, but that qualifies you then to be exposed to more air on top of a mountain so that you could perform more maneuvers. Okay, so Hang 3 now is you've been flying in the mountains already, and you've probably been sticking to a couple local places because that place is giving you loads of lessons every day, just the variability of the place. So you're already soaring, but you're perhaps got, your air time is within, the teens and stuff. And you haven't broken the umbilical cord of that particular location. Now, hang 4, you've generalized your experiences and you've gotten so much airtime that you could probably transfer your knowledge from one site to another. And not only that, perhaps you've gone through the trouble of trying to go for a cross country where you go as high as possible, maybe even to the base of the clouds, and then break the umbilical cord with the local site and try to go as far as possible on a cross country trip. And of course, you've got the skills to analyze the landing fields and such and land safely even though it's a foreign land. And equivalently, a hang 4 could be real masterful technique flying close to the ground, like in dune flying, that requires exceptional control skill. So that's basically the proficiency system, but of course there are details involved that I don't want to get into now, that your instructor will get into, and they will actually test you for these ratings. Okay, so Otto achieved hang 1 skill, and he was about teaching others how to do it, okay? And he had like 4 students underneath his wing, and the world would have been an entirely different kind of place if he hadn't had his accident, because he did have his accident, and of course the students lost their teacher, and now we have to wait for the Wright brothers then to extend his research into invention of the airplane. So now I want you to contemplate exactly how you think Gustav did it. That is, how did he achieve pitch, roll, and yaw in a manner without using machines? Okay, I want you to pause the video actually here and formulate a answer, especially if you're with somebody and you can kind of ponder about it a little bit. So go ahead, stop the video, think up an answer, and then restart it. Now, most people answer this question by saying it's a seesaw effect. You lean your body in one direction like a heavy kid on a seesaw, the seesaw goes down, and vice versa. And that's not quite what's happening, because there's actually a change in shape of the wing that is a result of you laterally moving your weight along the bar. Okay, let's give you the answer here. Here's Otto in one of his later designs. There's no ailerons here and no elevator here. This is just like a fin on an arrow, and yet he's doing the controls like we saw in the video of pitch, roll, and yaw. So let's think a bit this in terms like of a parachute. A parachute is made out of nylon. Nylon is really flexible, okay? You have a parachute and you have a load underneath it, and it has this mushroom shape. Now, if there's no load underneath the parachute, the person's gone, okay? The parachute loses its mushroom shape and it's just a bunch of laundry. Well, similarly, a hang glider is made out of flexible material. Now, it's stiffer than nylon, okay? It's made out of Dacron or Mylar, but it is flexible. It does make a mushroom shape underneath a load. And so we call that billow. So here we have a hang glider, okay? And the person underneath the pilot, underneath the wing in the control frame, swings his weight to the left here, okay, and it billows out the parachute sort of like a mushroom. And that looks like my hand outside the car window again, because you know the wind is going to interact with that billow shape to depress that wing and then create roll. Furthermore, this is acting sort of like a butter knife compared to this steak knife. And since there's more drag on this wing, it will be slower than this wing, and then therefore the whole wing will then yaw in this direction. So in a hang glider, we're both roll yaw coupled. You can't get one without the other. And furthermore, when you're swinging your body underneath the wings like that, there's no machines between you and that motion. So you can feel the wing change shape when you're shifting your weight. You can feel it through the bar, okay? Because there's no levers or machines transforming energy and insulating you from that feeling. And so that's why hang gliding is such a beautiful thing compared to any other way of flying, because you're directly connected to this change in shape, this variable geometry in the wing. And there has never been anything closer to feeling like a bird until the bioengineers figure out some way to sprout wings out of our backs. Okay, to recap, here's how an airplane does it. You have a stick that you can be moved left and right, and of course creates opposing ailerons to go up and down on either side of the wing, making that rolling motion. And the hang glider has a pilot whose center of gravity is moved to the right or left, creating a billow in the wing, a change in shape, just like the aileron on the airplane, but over a much broader area, of course making the physics a lot more complex, but also creating a better aesthetic feeling because there's no insulating machines between you and the air. Okay, and furthermore, another bit of physics that I enjoy emphasizing is the fact that you're not getting in a vehicle. You are the vehicle, because you weigh 3 times heavier on average than the hang glider. So really, you've got probably equal amount of physics as the hang glider itself in making the whole system fly. You know, unlike unlike an airplane, which probably can be radio controlled. So you're not getting in a vehicle, you are the vehicle. And that's why it is a little bit tougher than flying an airplane, because we have to train you athletically to become a bird. But of course, that's where all the joy comes from as well. Okay, so obviously shifting your weight under the glider is very important, because it has to be done properly to change the shape of the wing properly so that you have control. Who wants to be in the air out of control? Okay, so let's see how our animated figure here does that. Notice how his whole body is moving laterally to the bar, leaving nothing behind. A common mistake is that beginning pilots, will sometimes move their heads in one direction and their bodies in another. If this is my center of gravity here, so the center of gravity does no translation along the base bar, and so there's no billow shift. Another common mistake is that pilots will sometimes have this twisting motion, which is a really active motion and very intuitive. And both these activities seem like they should be doing something, but what actually is happening is there's no translation of the center of gravity so that it changes the shape of the sail. And that's about 50% of the people usually have some problems with that, and it has to be identified quickly before it becomes a habit. So that's a big part of your instructor's role, is to identify when that tendency exists. Okay, let's see how this is done closer to reality in a simulator right here. Okay, here I am in a simulator. Some years ago. Look how young I look. Notice my hands are more than three quarters down the down tube, making it so that I have lots of leverage. My hands here are in a hook hold. Okay, there's no grip, thumb on the outside, and here's my center of gravity right over here. And so let's start the video here and see me doing some weight shifting in this simulator.
Notice my elbows bending, hand and finger positioning, and my butt and legs shifting laterally to the bar.
Okay, so that's roll control. Let's go on to pitch control now. Okay, here we have an animated figure in a prone position. Now, most schools start their students in a upright position on the down tubes, not the base tube. There's an exception on the East Coast, which beginners and first couple lessons are put on the base tube just to eliminate any possibility of shoulder injuries. But they'll soon get you on the down tube once you're serious. So let's have this animated pilot pull in the base tube with his fingertips, or their fingertips, and he pulls in the bar, and we'll freeze the video right there. And you notice how when he pulls in on the base tube, the nose of the glider goes down, much like your hand outside the car window. When your hand is outside the car window, you can feel the lift in your hand on your palm, and as you lower it like this, you feel more of the wind on top of the sail. So that means there's lots of air flowing over the top of that sail. And now remember, that's a flexible sail. Remember, when we were weight shifting, we were changing the shape of the sail. You know, as we are weight shifting left and right, we are making that upper surface undulate. So you can imagine, with all that wind flowing on top of the sail there, that we're going to have a real crisp response out of the glider, because all that wind is interacting with that change in shape. Okay, so now let's get this figure to let out the bar. And I do mean let out the bar, because there is a feeling in his hands due to some other aerodynamic forces that we're going to describe. But we're going to have him let out the bar. Okay, so now that he's let out the bar, the wind is hitting more directly the bottom surface of the glider. That means there is more lift in the glider. But look at, there's less wind flowing over the top of the glider. So you can imagine that any change in shape of the sail he creates by weight shifting is gonna not have as much physics. In fact, he will have to shift his weight ever greater to have the same effect, to create a bigger billow so that he has control. So the lesson of this is there's a total trade-off between lift and control. Lift and control. And the secret of your lessons is what balance between lift and control do you need in every particular situation that you're going to be experiencing in your lessons. Let's talk about the physics of why you feel the things you feel in the down tubes. Now, you notice that with the nose down at this pitch angle, the wind is directly hitting the top of the sail. Now, you have to remember, this is a flexible sail. It's not rigid. That is, there's some pressure on top of that sail. And what we do with the trailing edge here on a beginner glider is we have a series of cables called reflex bridles that keep that edge in the same place. So as you're pulling in the bar, this is the shape that develops in the glider. Okay, the center of the sail gets depressed, but the trailing edge remains in the same place, forming this shape. And that looks like my hand outside the car window again. So now the wind is going to be hitting the back of the trailing edge, forcing the tail down. Of course, the whole keel of the glider is attached to the control frame, and your base bar is in your hands, so you're going to feel a sense of pressure. The more you pull in the bar, the more this shape develops, and the more difficult it gets. It's sort of like a bungee cord. You're pulling back on a bungee cord, and it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So actually, The amount of pressure that you feel in your hands is directly proportional to how much wind is flowing over top of the glider and how much control you have. So really, it is your communication with the air around you. So you can imagine how important those feelings of bar pressures are for you in your lessons. Okay, so I think this is where we can end today for this part 2. In part 3, I think we'll go back shortly to some basic physics, to what causes flight, because it's a good topic to bring up at Thanksgiving if you need to change the topic, and also putting together all our theory in a actual flight, a coastal flight perhaps, and in cross-country flight, because you have to have dreams, you have to have look forward to something, and then we're going to return to Earth with basic checking of our equipment, and description of the basic parts of a hang glider, and a description of the physics of its ingenious design. Okay, and finally, we're going to transition into the technique portion of this ground school, in which we're going to put together all the information in the proper way of launching a hang glider. And of course, this information has to be used in conjunction with your certified instructor, because your situation may have peculiar circumstances. So I'll see you next time.